All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our June 2024 IEF webinar. I'm Kayla Baskett, your webinar host, and this month we're going to be hearing about coral reef restoration in Fiji from Dr. Austin Bowden-Kerby, who's been working very hard to make heat and climate change resistant reefs in the Pacific Islands. What we have going on at a higher level, this is our last IEF webinar until autumn, and we're going to kick off autumn with a online conference in mid-September. So keep your eyes open on the newsletter and the website for announcements for that coming up. And I've also put some links in the chat for resources for Dr. Bowden-Kerby's website and an amazing, beautiful video that his team made, was commissioned to make for the UN conference. So now I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Bowden-Kerby.
So this is, okay, so for those of you who know me, I've been working at this. I've been very persistent, okay? I am not the best scientist in the world. I have some dyslexia problems, and I have a bit of autism, as you know. I'm all over the place. I get so excited about every little thing, which is not very scientific, okay? Now, so I am more like Santa Claus than a scientist. In a lot of ways. And I love little children. I love to give presents and so forth. But right now, the system that I'm working on and that I chose is climate change and it's coral reefs. So I work with restoration. I was the first person actually to take restoration of coral reefs up as a profession. And I kind of carved out a new profession. And now there are couple thousand people involved in coral reef restoration. And the system is all the work they've done, most of it just collapsed and it died last summer in the Caribbean. It was the area with the most coral restoration going on, and almost all the efforts collapsed. Okay, so I don't call what I do restoration anymore. Okay, it's like, okay, like you're restoring the old house. Oh, let's fix the kitchen cabinets. Let's get rid of this termite wood and fix it with nice good wood. Let's repaint the kitchen. That's restoration. Right now, the house is on fire. You can't fix the tiles anymore. You can't stop fixing the cabinets. That's irrelevant. You need to actually put the fire out. You need to actually try to keep things from burning up. So I don't call this restoration so much more. It's more of an adaptation, climate change adaptation. So I'm looking at coral reefs. What can we do to keep them from the coral species from going extinct? It's very different trying to keep species from going extinct than it is to get them more abundant and to restore what used to be there, because it's in the process of active collapse. So we don't fix the kitchen anymore. We don't repaint when the house is on fire. We try to get things secure. The first thing you do is you get your valuables and you run. Okay, you get out of there. So that's what actually the approach is. We grab the coral species that are still healthy and alive, and we run with them. We try to get them into cooler water. So you grab the children, you wake them up out of little bed at their beds, and you grab them and you run and you try to take them at least into the part of the house that's not affected by the fire, so that they can be around for longer. They won't just burn up. Okay. So the interesting thing is that after all these years, 35 years or whatever, working for so long, and in Micronesia and then over to the Caribbean and then back to the Pacific, after all these years, the United Nations has this decade action that they're trying to get. It's the ocean decade, and they want to have the different programs and projects that are working actively to save the ocean. It's ocean science, right? And so I put in, they asked for ideas on what would make a good action. So I put in the Reefs of Hope. I developed this Reefs of Hope, this rescue plan to save the coral babies out of this burning house, keep them alive longer until humanity can get the fire under control. And they liked it very much. They said, wow, we like this. We want more information. So I gave them more information. And then they, last February, approved Reefs of Hope as the very first endorsed, United Nations endorsed climate change adaptation for program for coral reefs. So this is a great honor, but it also, when you have something endorsed by the scientists at UN level, that means they recognize that there's some substance to it, that it provides a way forward, and it's the only way forward so far endorsed for coral reefs at UN level. Okay, so that is really big. Okay, now I would not be able to do that. I would not been able to reach this level if I ran away and just gave up. Okay, I didn't run away from those babies. I continued to be devoted to the corals and the coral reefs, and I was able to stick with it. And even when everything died that I had done for so many years, I didn't give up, even though it was depressing. I just stuck with it. So this is kind of amazing. And now we don't know exactly where it's going. So some of you might have some ideas, because a decade action is something that everybody in the world can participate in. Okay, it's no longer my project. Yeah, even though we're facilitating it, even though we're the origin of it, we're reaching out and we're trying to get endorsements. So what the United Nations people have told me is they've assigned me to SPC, which Arthur Dahl was involved with. South Pacific was called the South Pacific Commission at that time. Now it's called the Pacific Community. They even got rid of the South part, even though it's SPC. It's the Pacific Community. And they've assigned me to a couple people there that are in charge of the Decade Action. And we're going around getting endorsements from national governments. We're getting endorsements from prominent scientists. We're getting endorsements from big NGOs and things like that. And we've just started. We don't even know what we're doing. I don't even know what we're doing, because it looks like I'm the one who has to do most of the work. So anyway, if anybody wants to get behind it, if International Environment Forum wants to somehow keep promoting it, and anyway, so I'm just going to go through the slides quickly, but just keep in the back of your mind that this is right now in a form that is ready for those people who want to raise the banner and charge, with it, that we can go forward, we can move this up and say, do you know that there's a program that can actually buy us more time? There's a program that actually is very practical and very hopeful, and that keeps the coral reefs alive to the point where when finally humanity either gets its act together, or maybe there will be a nuclear war, or a overturning circulation collapse, or maybe a meteor will hit the earth, but eventually either Mother Nature rises up to solve the problem, or humanity gets our act together and actually works to save ourselves, because we're in the same basket. And once that happens, coral reefs are still alive. Our coral species are still alive, even if in limited pockets, and they can then reheal themselves. So in order to maintain hope for the future, we have to keep reproductive populations of these endangered species alive. And so that's what I'm doing. Okay, so let me just start this thing. Okay, so it'll take forever. So we all know that coral reefs are important. And so the reason they're so important to the Pacific is because they're the foundation of our food chain, the very food chain that people rely on. We call it food security, right? So the protein that people eat in the South Pacific is primarily coming from the reefs. It can be fish, it can be octopus, it can be shellfish, and so forth. And okay, in the South Pacific, if you add all the population of all these islands, of all the islands and coastal areas, not including the interior of Papua New Guinea, because there are a lot of people in New Guinea, but if you add all the coastal populations together, there are under 4 million people. And that's the population of like Puerto Rico, okay? 4 million people. It's not a whole lot of people. And we have like a third or 40% or something of the global coral reefs. So even with those vast coral reefs, and not that many people, overfishing was a problem. And so overfishing was one of the big threats. And pollution also, plastic pollution and so forth. So these threats are being addressed. And so they turned to the tradition. And I was really fortunate, because I came to Fiji when I was 21 back in the 70s, and there was no community-based management going on. There was no local tumble areas. The traditional management systems that had worked here for thousands of years and kept the fish from being overfished, they would have about 30% of the waters closed to fishing, and it kept everything abundant. And then the British came, and the French and the Americans, and they made colonies. And then they said, well, we own the water. You don't own that anymore. And basically the communities stopped, and they became Christians as well. And so much of their local management was based upon local belief systems that were then exterminated. And so you had a sacred reef here. Said, oh, this is a sacred reef. Nobody fished here for thousands of years. And now I'm a Christian. So the ones who became preachers, they said, oh, I want to prove my faith. I'm going to go catch fish inside our sacred reef and show the people that I don't die. And then they would show their faith, and then it would open it up. Everybody would jump in, and all these amazing reef animals and that hadn't been eaten for 1,000 years, suddenly people gobbled them all up. And so it caused a collapse of the resource because of conversion to Christianity, basically. And the Europeanization of these cultures caused them to abandon their tradition, and they stopped doing it. So seriously, what an honor to be able to be established in the first 5 no fishing areas established in Fiji, in the coral reefs and the mangroves. In the year 1999, I was here. I helped to facilitate this, and we got them established again. So from those first 5 community-based no fishing areas, it expanded in Fiji to now there's over 400 no fishing areas in Fiji. And this is not from the government. It's not from the NGOs. It's from the communities themselves. It's a grassroots revolution of restoration of their culture. So the indigenous peoples of the world have a wisdom that's based upon multiple generations. And we need to get it, it needs to come alive again. We need to have a resurrection of these cultural management systems. And so this is, I didn't do it. It was just, I just was questioning why in 1975, when I came to these villages, there was amazing fish. And what happened? And the people said, yeah, everything's gone. And we don't know why. So we started a series of participatory consultative workshops where communities found out what was happening on their own. They decided what was happening and what the solutions might be. And they said, well, in the old days, we had these tambu areas, these tambu areas, these no fishing areas, but we can't do that anymore because the government owns everything, and they claim all the reefs. And so we went to the government because, I never say, I don't care. I just went to the government and said, why can't these people make their tambu areas anymore? And they said, oh, but they can. We have that in the law now that they can. And so, really? And they didn't know that. Okay, so we shared, and the government said, yeah, you can put your tambu areas back again. And that was amazing. So there had been laws on the books for years that nobody knew about. And so there were some people that understood and so forth, but then we got it to be resurrected, and it was amazing. So it was just a little, like a spark, that this dry tinder started to burn again, and so forth. So anyway, so this is a picture of a no fishing area that's established in Tana Island, right? And these are some Baha'i youth. There used to be youth, and they're getting older. And they wrote to me way back in 20 years ago and said, we want to plant corals. And I said, well, I can't get there. And they wanted me to come, and I couldn't come. And I said, well, the first thing you need to do if you have no fish is to establish the custom no fishing areas. And they said, oh, okay, well, we don't do that anymore. And I said, go to your elders and see if you can reestablish custom no fishing areas. And they did that on their own. And so when I went to Tana a few years ago, I went into their no fishing areas, and this picture was taken. And they weren't doing coral work, but now the coral work is starting in Vanuatu finally. And because there's hardly any corals in their no fishing area because of the various stresses, especially extra cyclones and then the warmer waters. So I'm just going to keep going now because I'm going to be forever. Okay, so this is the big graph. This is the big website. So this is the climatereanalyzer.org, climatereanalyzer.org. It's every single day it's updated, and there's an update today. I didn't update this slide because I had, had made this with some right over, but it's now that the line continues above the 2023 line. So if you look at the mean here, it says mean. That line is the mean from 1981 to 2000 and no 2011. So 1981 to 2011. That's the mean of temperature, and then the little dashed line are 2 standard deviation units above the mean, which means if you get above that, that's way off. That's statistically significant. And in 2023, in March, the world's thermostat broke somehow. Okay. So I say this is the global thermostat broke. Suddenly, the temperature of the ocean became super hot. And it's continuing in 2024. It's every day in 2020. Every single day of this year has been hotter than every other day in history for the ocean, in recorded history. Okay. And so it's continuing along. Now we're hoping that it's going to parallel the 2023 line soon, but it's still higher. And that's the best we can hope for. It's not going back down again. We went over a tipping point. We don't know what the tipping point was, but there's theories, and it looks like this was a suppressed temperature, that this temperature had been suppressed by sulfur dioxide emissions from high sulfur fuels in the shipping industry. So the shipping industry was allowed to keep burning high sulfur fuels because it was in the ocean and it wasn't polluting the urban areas. So they were allowed to use high sulfur fuels. And it looks like a big part of this might be that they discontinued the use of high sulfur fuels, and that so the global warming that had been suppressed by high sulfur fuels causes sulfur dioxide, which cools the earth. So the earth had been cooled artificially for quite a while, and now suddenly that cooling has been released, and now this is true global warming showing itself, okay, without that pollution in the air. So the climatereanalyzer.org, everybody should visit it. It also shows the Arctic, the ice extent. You can click on the air temperature, and it's a cool site. And everybody needs to know about this site and share it so that people can actually watch our patient, which is the Earth. It's like the sick patient as the fever gets worse. Okay. So, and it's, don't just go there and freak out, but also think about that it's right now something that the whole world can participate in seeing the data. And it's already analyzed for us so we can actually see what's happening. So what this happened, though, it caused the temperature now is above 1.5 centigrade, the atmosphere. We've left that. Everybody said, the UN said we have to keep it below 1.5 degrees centigrade of the pre-industrial levels of temperature. Okay, so 1.5 was the official. We got to keep it below that, but we can't. It's already past that. So this year will be something like 1.7, maybe 1.8 above the pre-industrial levels. And there's already been like 2 months of this year, if you add up all the days, we've already been above 2.0 for multiple days this year. So we are heading to 2.0, and we are probably heading to 3.0, and we might even reach over 4. So this is degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels, which right now above 1.5, we're supposed to lose 90% of coral reefs are now supposed to die. Okay, according to the models, and this was the prediction for the last 20 years. We've been saying 90% when it gets to that, and now it's already happening. So this is the temperature. Okay, so if you look at this, there's 2 graphs here. Okay, the top one is the actual temperature of the ocean, and this is in centigrade. So 30 degrees centigrade is something like in the 80s. I don't know what Fahrenheit is. I can't do it automatically, but anyway, this is warm water. Okay, we know the human body temperature is 98.6 Fahrenheit, but that's 36 point something Celsius. So 36 Celsius is 98.6 Fahrenheit, almost 99. Okay, So the ocean in Florida in the shallow areas got to 101 point something degrees Fahrenheit, and that is 38.4 degrees Celsius. It got so hot, it got above the human temperature of our body. And if you go swimming in that water, you can pass out and die because your body can't get cool. The fish also die. The corals just melt and die. So in Florida, it got hotter than anywhere, any recorded temperatures for the ocean ever in history. And this is the Florida Keys. And that gray line shows this is the, so the top level is the stress level. You can see the stress level there. And right now, this is the black line. And right now, oh my God, look what's happening. This is worse than last year already. I mean, I just saw that. I just pulled this up last night to put here to update this, and I was shocked. Oh my God, we are in a worse condition than we were last year. This is impossible. And if you look down at the bottom shows the stress levels, this bottom graph, which is like a mountain, right? It shows the relative stress, and these are called degree heating weeks. That means the number of weeks that's above the temperature that causes corals to be stressed and to turn white, to become bleached, to start being sick, really sick, and their algae start running away or getting expelled. So this coral bleaching is happening. So right now, it is only the beginning of June, and we have never in history seen levels of this stressed in Florida Keys in history. And you saw last time it started in July, and this year it's starting a whole month earlier. And we don't know if it's going to be more stressed, but it looks like it's got potential to be. I mean, and there's hardly anything left. Almost everything died there. All the corals that people were planting. So you see these beautiful pictures of corals on these tree things hanging that are so beautiful. And you see all this hope, and it's all been shattered, and all those corals, almost all of them have died. Something like 99, literally 100% have died if they didn't move them out of the ocean. So Florida, because they got a lot of money, they moved thousands of corals into onshore facilities in aquariums and flowing water systems and kept them cool. And then they put them back out again. And now they're going to have to bring them back in again if they're still alive. So Florida is the leading edge. The Caribbean is the leading edge of the collapse. And it is just astounding. So time has run out. This is the end game now. Okay. This is when our house, it's spreading so quickly. It's burning, it's flaming. Everybody's going to die in their bed. And our bedroom is the coral reef bedroom. And that's the first one that's going to, everybody in that coral reef bedroom is going to die unless we get the corals secure. Okay. This is Samoa right now. Right now, Samoa is having the hottest water they've ever had in their history. Now, there's a positive thing from Samoa. Okay. Even though this is so hot, we have a lot higher survival there of corals. So this is a positive thing. We need to look at the positive and look at the stress levels they had. They had above 10-degree heating weeks multiple times. It turns out that those areas where the reefs have been stressed multiple times, but not too bad, multiple times, that they have, it's like you're getting sunburned multiple times, and then you get a big tan and you don't get so sensitive. So their corals in Samoa are stronger than they were. So at these same stress levels, they're actually having more corals survive at that high level than in the past bleaching events. So that's promising. The same thing is happening in Fiji. So there is evidence of some adaptation. Mother Nature was stronger than we thought she was. Okay. So these are my beautiful corals in Fiji that the BBC TV in 2009, they produced this video called The Coral Gardener. I was like, it was a big test because I was the focal point of an entire little special video on the BBC, and it was watched by tens of millions of people, and they put me on the limelight, and it was like, oh, the great old man is saving the world, and all these corals on the videos, all of them died. They all just up and died in 2014. Now they don't report that. Okay. I told them they should. And so this is really bad, but I've gone back to the site, and one of my last slides shows what we're doing there with the youth. So the same level of bleaching hit that reef this in 2023 that same horrific bleaching came back. And guess what? There was probably only 30% death instead of close to 100%. So the corals there are learning how to adapt, how to survive. So, I mean, they can do it, but to what extent? Okay, so this is a coral polyp. Corals are made out of these. This is under a microscope, and those tiny little brown things are algal cells, single cell algae. And the coral is an animal that has plants inside it. So it's ecologically more of a plant because it relies more on the sun than it does on feeding, but it can also feed. And of course, it has a skeleton, so it's also a rock. So it's kind of an amazing thing. But when bleaching comes, this is a bleach. This was the 2023 bleaching in that site, Moturiki, where you have the coral algae, the algae leaves the coral because of stress, because the photosynthesis reaction doesn't work in that hot temperature. And instead of producing sugar, the algae produces hydrogen peroxide, which burns the coral, bleaches the coral, and the coral has no choice but to kick the algae out, and it becomes white. And then the corals can starve to death. But for some reason, these corals, even though they were bleached, they had enough algae on the bottom or in hiding in the shadows, and they survived. A lot of them anyway. Okay, so not every coral also responds the same. So in a bleaching, you'll have some that are strong, which we call supercorals, and some that are weak. And the weak ones will bleach and end up dying, and the strong ones will survive. And over time, more of these strong ones have survived. And it looks like they've shared their algae with some of the survivors. And it looks like reefs are learning to adapt. So this is very encouraging. Okay, so where do corals learn how to survive into the future? So we're looking at these hot pocket corals. There are areas where the water is very shallow. I don't know if you've been in the summertime in the ocean where it's so hot on the surface. You know, that top 1 foot or 2 feet of water, the top 1 meter of water is very hot, and it's uncomfortably hot. I think most of you have been in that situation where it's even on a lake, it can happen. So you have this thermal layer. Well, that's the layer that actually touches the corals at low tide. Well, corals have been adapting to heat for thousands of years, for hundreds of thousands, for millions of years. And so there's a lot of resilience that is built up, and you will find it in those shallow waters. You won't find it in the cool waters so much. So what I'm saying is this is the place to look for resilience. And also the 38-degree centigrade or the 101-degree Fahrenheit readings in Florida were from these shallow waters. So these shallow waters have our most adapted corals, but they cannot survive at extreme temperatures. So they can only survive up to a point. Once it goes to 38, once it goes to 100 degrees and above, there's nothing can survive. Even the fish die. Even you'll die if you stay in that water. So there's a limit. And so we need, this is my whole Reefs of Hope idea, is that, wow, we have a chance. We can go in there and rescue these corals out of that burning room, get them to cooler water, put them down in the cooler water, and just, 1 kilometer away in that cooler water on the bottom of the picture, those corals up there could survive if we could just move them. And this is something communities can do. It's something resorts can do. It's something everybody relies on that coral reef can be trained to do, trained properly to do, and do it in an orderly manner, but very rapidly, and we can save this world. So that's why Reefs of Hope involves communities and the tourism industry and governments and everybody, training them first, making sure they're doing it the right way, making sure the government's happy, and moving corals from these hot areas to cooler areas. Okay. Now, people ask about, somebody asked, Carol wanted me to talk about sea level rise, and this shows sea level rise. Okay. And so what's happened is you can see the trend. It was back when we were kids, it was maybe, just a few millimeters, not even a millimeter a year. When I was a kid, maybe 1 millimeter. Now, then it went up to a little bit over a millimeter. Then recently it went to 3.2, 5. And then this year, it looks like, I'll show you a graph if I have time. There's a NOAA graph went out. It looks like it went up about 10 millimeters, maybe 11 millimeters this last year. Okay, is that temporary spike or is it going to be fixed? It looks like the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica is beginning to collapse. If the Thwaites Glacier collapses, the sea level will rise, they say, within just 3 to 4 years, will rise by 60 centimeters, which is more than 2 feet in a matter of seriously just a few years. And maybe that is needed. Maybe that is Mother Earth saying, stop it now. And I'm almost feel like instead of freaking out, I'm saying, Mother Nature has her ways. She has her homeostasis. She wants to cool off those hot pocket corals. She does. Mother Nature wants to keep those corals alive. She's taken millions of years to evolve those corals. She doesn't want them to go extinct. And her only solution of these hot pocket corals to keep them alive is to raise that sea level, because you raise the sea level, you cool off all the nearshore waters. Okay, so I feel horrible cheering on sea level rise and the Thwaites Glacier collapsing. I feel horrible because I see it as the only solution that Mother Nature has. She's got no other choice. We're forcing her into a corner to react. And now what will happen to the Netherlands? Actually, the Netherlands is probably one of the least impacted. Even at 60 centimeters, they'll be okay. But what about Bangladesh? Oh my God. Or Tuvalu? Oh my goodness. So this is really going to impact the poor people. So my heart just goes out and cries and say, what's wrong with me to cheer on sea level rise? But this is the dilemma. Mother Earth has no choice, but we have to give her a choice. We have to start behaving ourselves, but we're not. Okay. This is Christmas Island. They call Christmas. It's like spelled with a K, Kiritimati, it looks like. And it looks like Kiribati, but that's pronounced Kiribati. Ti is an S in Kiribati language, right? Ti is an S. Don't ask me why. But you can see where we are now. We're going cooler now. We're fine in Kiribati now in Christmas Island. But this, I'm showing this because this is the most impacted reef on the planet. And it went way up to 27-degree heating weeks. It was so hot that it cooked, and almost the entire population of corals became extinct. So I'm one of the few people in the world who work there. And it's because of a contact I had, Taratau Kirata, and also the Baha'i community. So I went in there to visit the Baha'is, to find out how they're doing economically with our NGO, and met my old friend Taratau from fisheries. He had moved there from Tarawa. I met him in 2005. And he asked me, he said, the corals are dead. What can be done? So I went there and we searched with the fisheries. We searched for 4 days for corals, and almost all these corals that you're looking at, they look still pretty and everything, but they're all dead. Okay. So we looked and looked and looked because of that extreme marine heat wave. We looked in the lagoon. Oh, look at the poor little fish. They got nothing to live on. And everything was dead and covered with algae now in the lagoon. And this is Christmas Atoll. It's the biggest atoll in the world. And I realized that in that lagoon, we had corals that could survive, I'm sure, to 36. I'm sure they could survive into the 90s Fahrenheit. But it didn't ever get that hot on the outside. But those corals can't swim away. They can't run. They can't move on their own. And if I had been able to move some of those corals into the cooler water, they would have survived. I realized that's when I had my aha moment. I said, oh, well, there's a simple solution, but it's too late. Okay, it's like going to a house that's burned down and the babies were sleeping in their beds. They were in their cribs. They couldn't run away. Babies can't run away. They're in their cribs. And if somebody just ran in and saved them, they wouldn't have to die. And these were the babies, that was their crib. And the babies all burned up because their parents, which are us, couldn't, we have to be the stewards. We have to run in there and save them. So this was my analogy. And seriously, we could have saved so many species that are now extinct on this atoll. So this is the one coral colony, the one that we found after 4 days of searching. And it's just a tiny fist-sized piece of coral on the side of a bigger dead one. And that is Acropora globiceps, which has now been declared critically endangered on the species. But look at the little fish. They have a little home because these little fish like live corals. They don't like dead ones. And so it's so important for the food security. And now that the corals are dead in Kiribati, and that's not just Christmas Island, the entire nation is the leading edge. And the fish have become poisonous with ciguatera because the dead corals support this horrible toxic microalgae that builds up in the food chain. So now a lot of people can't even eat their reef fish anymore. And the reef fish, a lot of the fish don't have even a home. So there's less reef fish. Okay, so this is Christmas Island, Christmas, and this is the edge of the beach, and these are big, giant tabulate corals, like table-shaped corals. And the species, this tells us, there's no data from this atoll really about what used to be there, but I can see from this that these corals used to dominate these reefs, and now we can't even find a single one. There's not a single one of this species left on this atoll. But we can probably bring it in from Tarawa. There's still some of these species in Tarawa, but we have to, if we do this right, so that we have a restoration plan, and we have to make sure if we plant corals that they have to be strong and heat adapted. We have to find corals that can take the heat, put them back on the reef, and then create a breeding population. We can't plant the whole reef. It's too big. It's ridiculous. But we can get them to make babies again. And once we get them to make babies again, then there's hope that nature can spread those babies, right? So we don't want to impose our human solution on there. We just want to help Mother Nature with her own solutions, nature-based solutions. Okay, so here's Tarawa, the one in the middle, and the reefs are very dead there, and all these atolls. And so they have it every year bleaching, and they had a 3-year respite where they had no bleaching. And that was really nice during La Nina, and now El Nino, and now La Nina is coming back again, so they might have another respite, which is good. But all the corals that had recovered there, because it's close enough to New Guinea. This part of Kiribati is close enough to New Guinea that lots of baby corals came in, and it was so hopeful. And they were all about the size of little saucers and little plates, little plates. And there were so many, but they all died. So they weren't any more adapted. So we have programs for this. There are still a few corals that are big that survived that initial bleaching, but they're so far apart they can't breed. So our plan for Kiribati is to get samples, or even the whole colonies, of these few corals that did survive the bleaching, get them back together into a breeding population so that the babies can form again. So we're looking at helping Mother Nature to reboot her natural process. It's like not rocket science. I mean, anybody could figure that out, you'd think, but it takes somebody with autism and dyslexia to figure these kinds of things out. And there's no scientists working here. Everybody thinks, oh, no, let's work on the Great Barrier Reef where things are still okay. Or let's work in the Caribbean where the tourism industry is and where we have lots of money in the United States or in Hawaii. Nobody works in Kiribati, hardly anybody, because there's no money and there are no scientists really on the leading edge. So if you're going to wage a war, you want to be on the front line. You want to be on the leading edge of that war. You want to defeat the enemy at that front line. And if nobody's working on the front line, how can we even defeat the enemy of climate change and coral reef collapse? So I'm hoping that people will recognize this and start working on this. Is where the lessons that we're going to learn, that we need to learn, will be learned, is on this front line. Okay, so I looked at the NOAA data, and I found that you couldn't even, there was no, the data is just sitting there. It's unanalyzed, the graphs I saw. But I looked at those graphs, I counted them all up, and I compared the countries. So if you look at the middle part, Kiribati to the South Pacific, this middle part, here's Kiribati, which are the most severely impacted reefs. The black means it's gone so hot that almost nothing survives. Okay, now every one of these reefs are going to be in the black in the next decade, maybe less. Okay, Tuvalu was the least impacted reef, that little teeny short column. Tuvalu was the least impacted of all the reefs in the world, basically. That red bar is only from this year. Okay, I added the red bar, but in 2023, it hadn't actually had a major death, a bleaching that would cause corals to die at all. But they didn't have very much experience with bleaching, so the corals were very sensitive because they weren't trained. Fiji, on the other hand, has had all these multiple bleachings, and the corals are learning to adapt. So nobody's looking at it this way. And I'm telling people, I made this graph and say, look, this is from the NOAA data. It's online. And I had to make this graph. And it's showing that the Solomon Islands, I have big hope for the Solomons. Look at it, that green column with a little arrow here. Solomon Islands, I have big hope for Solomons because they've never had a mass die-off event, but they have multiple low stress events that can potentially be training the reefs of the Solomons to survive into the future. Now, so this is hopeful, but I haven't been to the Solomons for a decade. So, and that's before the bleaching actually started, but let's go see what's happening in the Solomons. But I want to go back, but we can't yet. Okay, so this is Tuvalu. I went to Tuvalu and said, okay, everybody saw what happened in the Caribbean. This hot water was coming. and Tuvalu is expected to have their first die-off event. So I went to Tuvalu, and Tuvalu has the most amazing coral reefs I've ever seen in my life. It was like going back in a time machine 50 years ago. Amazing. And so there's a big hot pocket in Funafuti. I said, oh, let's go to the hottest water. Let's take these corals and let's move some, because what's happening is probably going to cause that water to get so hot that everything dies. So we have a hot pocket that's still intact. Let's see what happens. So I went there, and we had a local NGO, Falingafo, that's formed by Taratau. It's basically a bunch of Baha'is that got together, youth, and they made this NGO. And so I worked with them and with the fisheries department, and we moved corals to that little, there's a couple passes, so we expect it to be cooler. We moved them there. And the idea is to establish, if everything dies, to establish a pocket of every species, of all the main species, in an upcurrent position, because that is the upcurrent position. It's where the water comes in that's cool from the ocean. And we hope that it'll be cool enough for those corals to survive, and so that they will reseed the reef naturally. And we actually did this. And I have to go back now, but the temperatures are still increasing in Tuvalu. So it's been bleaching since December all the way now until June. Can you believe it's been above condition 1, condition 2, and it's very, very hot. So the word is from fisheries that most of the corals have died in Tuvalu since we went there. So all those beautiful pictures that I have and films will be very depressing when I go back, but hopefully we'll have a ray of hope. And this is the ray of hope, that we have a parent stock that can then reseed the reefs. Okay, so the assumptions that we're looking at is the ocean will never go above 33. Okay, no matter what. Now, even at a 4 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels, maybe the ocean in the summer will go to 33. Maybe that's the most. 34, I don't think so, but nobody's really looking at it. And as far as the nearshore waters, the ocean is going to be deeper, and so the nearshore waters will be cooled off some there. So anyway, so we're assuming that we still have some time, that at least in my lifetime it won't go over 33. And of course, everybody in this picture, except for Kala, is probably the one who'll see it. but most of us will be gone. But I don't think it's going to go over 33 in Kala's life. Maybe 34 at the most ever. But the outer corals on the outer parts of these cool parts that touch the ocean, that are bathed in the ocean water, will never get hotter than 33 or 34. Okay, and there are heat adapted corals that can take hotter than that. So what's the problem? Okay, if corals can take it, all the species of corals can take that heat, and you have cooler water than what they can take. What's the problem? The problem is they can't get there. They can't move. They can't swim. They can't walk. And in the past, when climate change happened like this, you had thousands of years, but maybe or hundreds of years. But now we have just almost no time at all to move, because you can swim as a baby. The babies can swim, right? And so you can move by swimming as babies. As they reproduce, the heat adapted corals can send their adaptation away in their babies, but there's no time. So these corals have to be rescued. This is urgent, and this must be done on a global level. And I'm screaming my head off. I'm not the best person to promote this, because people, oh, Austin, he's one of those handicapped people. We don't have to listen to him. So we need, but now on paper, it looks great. And I come across better on paper than in person, because I am not all excited on paper. I have to, don't put too many exclamation points. So basically UNESCO has said, this is the way forward. Okay, now we just need the governments to say, this is the way forward. And I have some prominent scientists that are globally renowned coral reef scientists who say, this is the way forward. So there's about 5 of them that are willing to say, this is the way forward, and very prominent ones. And so I'm really very happy for that. And they tell me that I'm saying, and I'm the worst person for this, I'm too enthusiastic. They all say, Austin, your enthusiasm is refreshing. So we're all depressed, and we want you to cheer us up. Okay. So I would never be able to have discovered any of this stuff if I were not a Baha'i. Seriously. because of the writings and all they talks, the Guardian, Shoghi Effendi, Baha'u'llah talked about the series of events that would be momentous and possibly catastrophic in their nature. They talked about the cancerous materialism eating at the vitals of society and spreading around the planet. They talked about the earth becoming weary of people, basically, and that would be this great crisis, and that it would be horrible, and this cancerous materialism would be the root cause. And we see it. And so, but they said that world peace would be established, and I have total faith and confidence in world peace. They said that the resources of the planet would, instead of being thrown away on war, would be galvanized and focused on saving the world and on, beating the swords into plowshares and the spears into pruning hooks, like in Isaiah, that the promises of all the religions are true, and there will be world peace, and we will focus, and we will reorient, and hopefully, just hopefully, the species of animals in Africa will survive, and in South America, the Amazon will survive. Hopefully, if not the whole thing, but at least enough to reboot the natural regenerative processes of nature, and this beautiful planet will flourish, and in all its wonderful diversity will come alive again. And this is the resurrection spoken of, that we will come alive again. And so if you don't have that hope, you're paralyzed. You're paralyzed with fear and with eco-grief. They call it eco-grief now, and with this horrible sadness. And even some of the scientists that I've known and admired, so they've even killed themselves. It's so sad, really sad. And I will not do that, and I will never give up, because I know that this world has an amazing destiny, and I believe in destiny. And I tell people, I've even told at a scientific meeting, maybe it was too much for them, but I had a dream in 1978 that all the corals turned white. Okay. Nobody had ever seen bleaching before. I had never heard of bleaching. Nobody saw it. And in 1985, Peter Glenn wrote a paper describing coral bleaching for the first time in Panama. Dr. Peter Glenn is 92 now. He wrote me a personal letter twice saying that he had read my paper on Reefs of Hope and found it the most promising thing he had ever seen. And he's putting it in his book. So here's a prominent scientist, the one who first described coral bleaching and tried to explain what was happening. Peter Glenn in 1985 has said, I told him that I had a dream in 78, and I think it was too much for him, because it's very hard for people who don't believe in anything. But he still says, whatever it is, the fact that you have a positive attitude and you've discovered a way through this to keep corals alive, he sees it as the most promising thing he's ever seen for coral reefs. So, and so I have to be careful who I share that dream with, and among the dream, actually, so to finish the dream, I went into the past. I saw the light was streaming out of the past, and among the bleached skeletons of corals were bleached human skeletons. The bones were just as white as the corals. And I woke up in a cold sweat and not know what it means. So the human skeletons and the corals together. I mean, this is our defining moment. If we allow those corals to bleach and completely die, goodbye humanity. That's what I feel. And we have a chance. And I was chosen, I believe, at that moment because I'm spiritual, I guess, compared to other people. And I was praying every day. I was actually on a program, a Baha'i program, and we were praying and meditating every day. We were immersing ourselves in the writings, and we were thinking, how can we contribute to the regeneration of this planet? And so, and in this spirit of prayer and meditation and detachment and seeking out, how can I best serve? I had this dream. And I think the universe said, okay, Austin, you're going to be involved in helping these corals survive. And wow. So if anybody who's young, who's trying to figure out, what do you want to do in this world? How would you like to make this world a better place? How can you become part of the solution? Immerse yourselves in the ocean of his words. Unravel the pearls of wisdom that are hidden in its depths. And anyway, that's what I did. And here I am. And so it's all about the connection of life to these pure communities, the cultures of the South Pacific. So it was done as it's all part of the solution. People are the problem, and therefore people are the solution. So if you work with people, that's part of this. That's right there. That's beautiful. So there are so many ways people can express themselves in a way that will actually help save this planet. To save the planet, you have to save the people. To save the people, you have to save the planet. Okay, it's all there as one thing. Okay, so here's Fiji. These amazing hot pockets. Oh, crazy, amazing hot pockets. And nobody's ever gone there. You know, no scientists. There's been no expedition of scientists. There's been no scientists ever to publish a single report on these hot pocket areas. We don't even know what's there. Now, I just recently got somebody write me that there might be some satellite data that can tell us what temperature it is there more specifically. So I'm looking at, I'm just wrote a letter today. Is that available? Yesterday. So if these hot pockets still have thriving coral populations, then we need to save them. Now, on the positive side, when we have normally the trade winds come from, I mean, the south is down below us, right? The trade winds come this way. And so that's the leeward side, the hot side. But when we have our worst bleaching years, the trade winds reverse and it comes from the wind. The leeward side becomes the windward side. So the positive thing is I think there's something still there because it becomes the cool side of the island during our bleaching years. So I'm hoping, just hoping, and I think I might be right, that there's corals thriving there that can survive above 35 degrees centigrade. I mean, talking about all the species that exist on the reef are there. And that's probably also the sea cucumbers and everything else, giant clams that are also able to survive in hot water. So this La Nina is coming again, and this hot water is coming at us, and we're scared to death. But we know that the wind will reverse, and the hottest side will become cooler than the coolest side. So the coolest side gets hottest, and the hottest side gets cooler. And so this is keeping those hot corals around, and it's making those cool adapted corals all die. Okay, so we'll have a huge die-off event. Anyway, so we're preparing. So this is our primary site. I live on this main island here. Our island is about the size of a little bit bigger than the state of Connecticut. And Fiji, the land area is about the size of New Jersey. And the whole state is like scattered over an area the size of Wyoming or Colorado. So this is the leeward hot pocket that I work in. And I had no money to do this. And it's because of a tourist resort that we were able to do any of this as far as what you're going to see now. So there's a resort on this island called Plantation Island Resort, and they have been supporting the project. I don't get paid, and they haven't paid me yet since 2018. I've been working there, and the whole idea is to move these corals from hot water to cooler water. And this is so cool because we have a double barrier reef. So I say that baby bear's porridge was too hot, Papa bear's porridge was too cold, and mama bear's porridge was just right. So I'm saying these middle reefs are mama bear, where it's just right. This is hot enough that corals can learn how to adapt. This is so hot that it's already going above the maximum temperature. We have temperatures already recorded at 37 degrees there, okay, which is above the survival of most corals. But we've moved those corals to mama bear, where it's warm and where it gets to at the most. We recorded 33 in the nursery, but they didn't die, they didn't bleach. And then we're now moving them out even to cooler reefs out here. So we have the cool reefs. And most of these corals died out here on the outer reef because they were adapted to cool water and it got too hot. So Papa bear's corals are mostly dead because it was too cold. Baby bear's corals are going to be mostly dead soon because it's too hot. And mama bear is the most stable because it's warm enough for her to learn how to live into the future. And, you know, our mama, she's always the best. So anyway, so I use that when I talk to kids. So this is mama bear. She's got some most beautiful corals. You'd say, wow, in all this stress, these corals can survive. These reefs got to 32, 33, and there was very little bleaching. So these corals are really adapted. But if it gets to 38, they're going to all die here too. So we're moving these corals out to cooler water. And we're hoping to keep them alive. And I have trust in Mother Nature. She's doing it the best she can, like I said. If she can just raise the sea level just a little bit, it'll cool off these hotter reefs. Just a little bit, come on. And she's doing it pretty quickly now. So this is our gene bank nursery. We have all kinds of species in our gene bank. And so these gene bank nurseries are beautiful. They're wonderful. The corals grow so fast. They grow crazy fast. And we have a hard time dealing with so much coral because where do we put it? And so we're trimming these and we move the corals out, out, out. And so this is in one of our nurseries in a stress site. We have more than one nursery. This is what we call a testing nursery. It's in Baby Bear Reefs. And look what happened. It got to 35 degrees here, and 2 species on the left are bleached. And we removed those from the nursery. We planted them on cooler reefs. They didn't die, they just bleached, but we put them in cooler water, they survived. And the 2 genotypes here, these are 1 genotype per rope, right? So we've taken branches from one single colony and put them on the rope. Those 2 we graduated into our supercoral nursery. So everything in our nursery can survive to 33 degrees centigrade. Okay, and we have the biggest collection of heat adapted corals in the world, I believe. Okay, thank you for the resort. And so one of the things we were doing is after a bleaching kills off most of the corals, you say, oh, well, we still have some alive. And you're like, oh, yay, great. That's what I did in the year 2000 when we had our first bleaching in Fiji. Oh, we still have some corals alive. Wow. And most species have a few corals. Okay, so we're fine. No, because the things that eat corals are hungry. And where before they had a whole smorgasbord full of things to eat, now they only have a little tiny bit. So it's like having a crowd of 1,000 people with unlimited food, and they're fine. But once you only have one little table full of coral, then you have 1,000 predators, they're going to eat them. And so within a year, within 6 months, within even 2 months, everything that survives gets wiped out. So we have a snail that loves to eat coral. And there were 83 coral snails on that one colony in Kiribati, in Tarawa. 83. And that was the last of that species that I could find. Okay. It was almost dead. I saved its life. And the crown and thorn starfish, it looks like a bleached coral. That's not bleached. That's dead. The tissues have been removed. The crown of thorns takes their stomach out and puts it on the coral, digests the coral, and then puts the stomach back and moves on to the next coral. Okay. So we have these predators. Butterfly fish, they're so beautiful. We love them. Well, guess what? They can strip the entire tissues off of these corals when they become rare, because this is their favorite food. And they say, oh, we need this. We want to, if they don't have coral, they die. So they have to eat. So they end up stripping all the tissues off the coral. This is parrotfish. Oh, love, don't kill the parrotfish. They're saving. No, parrotfish can be horrible. They can just completely devour all the corals. They love to eat it. That's their ice cream. Yeah, they eat a lot of dead coral. It's true. And they make sand. The whole beach is parrotfish poo-poo, right? Because they eat all these dead corals, recycle them. But they also have a demand for live coral, and they can wipe it out. Okay. So this is one of our nurseries. And there's some missing corals on those because we had this horrible, yucky blue-green algae came and stuck on there. And we found that the only thing that the nursery won't protect them from is this yucky algae that no fish like to eat. But the fish, we don't clean these nurseries. The fish clean these nurseries. We have it right up against the reef. We don't have to do any cleaning, except for when that yucky algae that nothing likes to eat goes on the coral. And we found a way, I'll tell you, we found a secret way of letting nature clean those. These are corals. You see all the little fish, they help keep the corals clean. They dust them off, they keep them clean. And these little pesky fish, these are the fish that saved our corals. These fish hate that yucky algae that gets on our corals. And so we untied those ropes and put them with these fish, and they weeded all the yucky algae off and saved their lives. So if I go back quickly, those corals that are gaps, those are where the algae killed the coral because we didn't know what to do. But now, every time that yucky algae comes, about once a year or every other year, we take it and put it with these fish, and within 24 hours, they clean it all off. Then we put the rope back because it's just too much work. We couldn't do it fast enough. So these fish are called farmer fish, and now we're having them do our farming for us. Okay, so it's a nature-based solution. Now, these fish are very important because they protect the corals from the enemies. They won't let the butterfly fish near the coral. They won't let the crown of thorn starfish or those snails kill the coral either. And they keep that yucky algae off the coral, the cyanobacteria, the blue-green algae. So these fish are very, very important in climate change adaptation, because if you do have a mass bleaching, if some of those corals are in the territory of these fish, they will survive. So this is totally new information. People didn't know this stuff. Okay, so the lessons learned are the heat adapted coral populations are vulnerable. We got to move them out. And when the corals become rare, the predators can kill them. So these are the 2 most important lessons that nobody else ever thought of that are part of Reefs of Hope. And this is why it's unique, that we have to move the corals And then we have to use nature-based solutions. And like the farmer fish, we have to have all these techniques on keeping the corals alive. And it takes people. And the people who have the most to lose from coral reef collapse are communities in the South Pacific. We're involving these. So this is a nursery here during that mass bleaching when 90% of all the corals turned white. I went out with 5 youth from Motariki, and we found, and I showed them, oh, this coral's unbleached. Look at it. It's very different. Oh, but what about, and they grabbed one. Oh, no, this one just died. See, it looks a little different. That one's freshly dead. It's still pretty, but you can see the tissues are gone. Oh, yeah, we get it. They went out and we collected this we made a nursery. This was when the water was starting to get cool again. We took the entire colony because we're afraid of the crown of thorns and the snails and the other things. And so we made the first in history coral nursery out of supercorals, out of bleaching resistant corals. And so now we have that. And now the youth can plant these corals. So we want to plant corals on these structures because if we do it ourselves with cement and so forth, like they're doing around the world, planting these little corals, the little corals, when they're small, they have a high mortality. We're trying to create fish habitat immediately. So we make them on these, this is like standard floor mesh. So I developed this technique where you can get this floor mesh, you coat it with epoxy so it doesn't rust. And then the children do the coral planting. Why? Because it's their future. They need a stake in this. So while the other coral efforts are using scientists or volunteers to plant corals or using toothbrushes to clean them, we don't do that. We use children and fish to take care of the corals, okay? And it's wonderful because the children need to see these corals growing, and those are super corals that can survive to 33, at least 33, okay? And these A-frames, this is what we try to plant, bigger colony. We're trying to create fish habitat, and we are creating fish habitat. So, and we're trying to save the world using corals and children and communities, okay? And of course, we need scientists too to verify and to say, yeah, this is the way to go. And we need to train people. We can't just have people randomly going around breaking corals and planting them. We need to control it, okay? So we found that the fish keep the corals healthy. So once we get fish there, it helps the corals to thrive. Okay, then they make noise. The fish make noise and the little shrimp make noise. And the baby corals that are trying to come back and find the reef hear that and want to settle. The corals make a smell that's very distinctive. The Japanese have discovered, and they even named the chemical. So they release a smell that causes the baby corals to want to settle. So they have the sound, and the fish clean up the rocks, and the rocks kind of look pink because of this coral and algae. Turns out the coral larvae, even though they have no eyes, somehow they can sense pink and red, and they love red and pink, and that's where they want to settle. So through sight, sound, and smell, it helps the coral babies find the reef. So if you don't have any corals on that reef, the babies keep going. So we're putting patches that will cause a natural rebooting of the resettlement and natural processes. So this is very, very this is totally revolutionary, where you're actually using a nature-based solution and finding out how do corals recover on their own. And this is something that I've had to learn from the corals themselves, and reading all these little reports that are very hard to find sometimes, because the people who did that study didn't carry it forward to how to save coral reefs. They just put it as a fact on the shelf. So that's what an autistic mind does. They take all these little facts that are not even related. People can't see their connection. And autistic people can see the dots. They can see the picture that it draws much faster than other people. So if any autistic or anybody of you have autistic children or autistic relatives, you should respect them, because they actually, if you can give them all this unrelated information, they can actually synthesize, they can see the patterns and what's happening. You know, like Rain Man could count how many matches were on the floor instantly. And sometimes they're these savants, you know, in certain areas. So we need, and our educational systems eliminate people like me. Okay. It's amazing that I'm a PhD and a master's and bachelor because I'm persistent, but I was a poor student because I don't really conform to those exams and all those things, memorize, you know, all that stuff that I have to go through. Anyway, that's a different topic. But so if people are the problem, people are the solution. And we have to involve these people that we've called handicapped. They're not handicapped, they're geniuses, okay? I'm not saying I'm a genius, but on certain levels, I'm very handicapped, and other levels, and all of us are that way too, but normal people are more balanced in all the areas. But those of us that are less balanced, please bear with us, because if we're unbalanced, it might mean that we have a superpower. Okay. So I have a superpower, and that God has given me that superpower, and I've used it instead of a handicap. I've turned it into a superpower, right? So if anybody who has those problems see these things as strengths. And I know some of our grandchildren, say, wow, okay, that applies to them perhaps. So we have to get people to have faith in themselves, that they are unique and they have something to contribute. And not everybody has a superpower, but those of us who have problems, if we have weak points, we probably end up having superpowers in other areas. Like people who are blind have super senses of hearing, is an example, or of smell, right? And so they can even echolocate and stuff like that we have no idea. And so one handicap makes for superpowers in another area. Okay, so we're involving people. The A-frames are like this. You could also put them in sand where there's no reef. And so the A-frames are vulnerable to crown of thorns. So if you have too many crown of thorns, you can put them in sand, and your corals will still produce the signals. But if there's no hard rock there, the babies have nowhere to settle. So that's the only downside. But at least you can keep them alive. Okay. And this is in a hard rock area. These are 4-year-old A-frames in a no fishing area that before COVID, we put these up, and it is so encouraging. The community got so excited after COVID. They called me and they said, Austin, come quickly. There's amazing, something's happening. And I said, what's happening? And I thought something, and so they took me down and they look underneath these, and they're just crammed with fish. And they were so excited. They said, we want to make 100 of these. And I said, I don't have any money. So I came back and I said, I'll look for money. And I have some money to help them. But at that point, there was no money. And so I came back, and they had found their own money, and they made 6 more of these A-frames, and they were so proud of it. But to have a community raise their own funds, save their own money, sell cassava and get the money from the market, and then buy these materials so they could do this, it's just amazing. And so under there are fish. You can't see how big these are, but these are edible size. They're bigger than my hand, and there are some bigger ones that are under here too. And these are really, really good houses. In the daytime, they're full of squirrelfish, and the nighttime, the parrotfish come to sleep here. So we're putting them in the no fishing areas. We're trying to support the community-based management. So I don't have to go too much over these, but the Reefs of Hope is the first UN endorsed strategy. I've said it focuses on coral species survival in the face of these intensifying heat waves. It's modeled after tropical forest restoration. The tropical forests are finding out that it's birds that cause the forest to regenerate, and they're not using little seedlings anymore. They're using much bigger seedlings so that the birds can sit down on them and then eliminate the enemies and poop and give fertilizer and bring in seeds. So we're doing similar things, and we're looking at reef dependent communities and the tourism industry, both that have the most to lose, as being our manpower, and we have to empower these people. Okay, so we have lots of progress that's already been made. The no take tumble areas, there have been hundreds of them. So it went from Fiji, where we restored it, and it spilled over to Vanuatu and the Solomons, and all this has been resurrected all over the whole Pacific. So now there's probably over 1,000 no fishing areas in the South Pacific at least. And this is all started from 1999, when there were 0 or almost none, maybe a few in Papua New Guinea where the custom hadn't died out. So the government really is supporting these no fishing areas. They give the baby giant clams from hatcheries, and the giant clams can get huge and are encouraging. So we use the giant clams from fisheries. And the university here, we have over 600 indigenous islanders who have a Bachelor of Science in Marine Studies, in marine science, a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree, and they don't have jobs. So what we envision is getting the money through the UN or some other way to employ hundreds of these indigenous marine scientists to go out into the communities, to go out and get jobs in the livelihood, in the tourism industry, and have a livelihood that now is supported through tourism. So if we can get these people trained and operational, and with the funds, we can really move this world. And so we're also looking at youth service projects, right? So the junior youth program in Kiribati is looking at this. Vanuatu, the same. Fiji in some areas, but it has to be a rural area that's up against the village, up against the coral reef. So only some places it's appropriate. So we have programs all around the area. And we also have this farm that I'm on now, where we can sleep 30 and train people in livelihoods. So if communities are setting aside 30% of their reefs as no fishing areas, how are they going to eat? And we're training them in happy chickens and cocoa production and so forth. And I've given a seminar with Winnie on the agricultural group, and we look at solving this problem. And we need no fishing areas because we need a balance on the reef. The last thing corals that are stressed need is additional stress of pollution and overfishing. Okay, so we have all these countries, this is amazing. With almost no money, we've been able to establish pilot sites all over the place in the South Pacific. And we have actually, we have Tuvalu has formed an NGO. The Baha'i youth have formed. It's open to all, but it was Baha'i inspired in Tuvalu, Baha'i inspired in Samoa, Baha'i inspired in Vanuatu, and so our board are mostly Baha'is, but we open to all. It's just finding people that believe in the future is hard to find, because most of the people that are Christians are saying it's the end times right now. It's the end of the world. That's the general perception. And you talk to people, no, this is the end of the world. And so when you think it's the end of the world, that disempowers you. So we're trying to find, why is this Baha'i inspired? It's because we're the only ones who believe there's a future. Okay. So this is why we have to work with the Baha'is. But we open our, the junior youth program. It opens to all the youth. We want all the youth to feel that there's a future. And so we have to speak in the language of the people. So I always say, where does it say it's the end times? Does it say that in the Bible? And we look and look and look, and there's nowhere in the Bible that says it end times. It says time of the end. And it's the time of the end of slavery. It's the time of the end of the suppression of women. It's the time of the end of illiteracy. It's the time of the end of racism. It's the time of the end of war. This is the time of the end. And it's the time of the beginning of a whole new world. It's the time, and Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Why would he lie to us? Seriously, that's what I tell him. Why would Jesus lie to us? He said that we will inherit the earth. Listen to Jesus. Don't listen to those people in America that say it's the end times. Look for your own eyes. And so we're leading an effort to try to restore Christianity to its purity of hope. Love is the answer in Christianity. We have to love this world. So become a better Christian. Join the junior youth program. Become a better Christian. Have hope and believe in the words of Jesus that you're going to inherit the earth. You just have to be humble and meek. Okay? And the Isaiah is they shall beat their swords into plowshares, right? And so that's a promise. It's not a lie. So these people from overseas are polluting the minds of these Christians over here that it's the end times. And this is masses of people, okay? And it paralyzes them. So we have to restore Christianity to its true nature of hope, of love, and working for the future. Thy kingdom will come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Anyone want to share a little story or a point of learning that they have brought away on all of this ocean conservation? Arthur?
Well, I think with this wonderful story about what you're doing in the islands, and I think this is an area where the small island developing states are at the front of working for global cooperation. They know their survival is being threatened by the sea level rise, and they're some of the most vocal now to get governments to go beyond the narrow self-interest of national sovereignty and to actually start building better governance for the environment at the global level. So I think the kind of work that you're doing there at the grassroots with the people is laying a foundation. We've already seen Vanuatu take their climate change course to the International Court of Justice. And so there's a lot that we can do by reinforcing the good examples in the island countries, and hopefully the rest of the world begin to address these problems. And some of us are now working at that level, trying to also bring a solution at the global level to slow down climate change. But as you say, there's big resistance from the fossil fuel industry and how they've captured most of the world today. So a lot needs to be done. So vote for the least worst people, perhaps, not expecting them to solve it, but at least to avoid the worst from happening. Thank you.
Excellent. Let's hear from Winona, and then we'll hear from Marjorie after Winona.
I'm sorry, I had to move because my battery was dying, but Austin was essentially a youth when we first met in North Carolina, and he was teaching the young children at summer schools exactly the way you're doing it now, Austin. And Johanna's daughter wants to study marine science. She's starting university this coming fall. And you've got a whole cadre of young folks in the world who will soon be in charge of governance as well. So keep the faith.
All right, Marjorie, and then Rodney.
Thank you. This has been absolutely wonderful and very inspiring. I was going to say I may have an opportunity if the recording is ready to share in about 2 weeks. Rodney and I will be at a week-long non-Baha'i conference talking about natural history, and the corals is one area that is not otherwise being covered. So we may have an evening session where we can share this. So thank you very much. We'll be in the Gulf of Maine when we do that. Thank you.
Rodney.
Yeah, this has really been great. And I have a question about one of the graphs, the one where you show the global mean sea level change. There's a notable change in the slope of the graph where the information came from satellite radar altimetry. I just wonder if Austin wanted to say something about that.
Okay, so this is a graph you're talking about? Oh, it's not shared. I have to share. Oh no, it's shared.
Sharing.
Okay,
no,
shared.
it's the one that's labeled global mean sea level change, and you have satellite
that
radar.
One.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. Where is that one? There.
That one, yeah.
Yeah, this has not been updated. Okay, that was not updated. Okay, so what was your question?
So I was wondering if the where you use the different technology to get the data, is that change in slope where you go from the blue to the red. It was just because a different technology was used.
Okay, yeah, that's different technology. This is not my graph. This is from the internet, and I'm trying to find an updated one, but I can't find it. And I think, why aren't they doing this? I have other data from NOAA. NOAA's put out a new graph that shows I could actually show it to you. It has one that shows it in action and actually moving like a GIF. So what it is now, the slope is actually much steeper now, and so they do change some of their methods because they're going way back. So this is just looking at sea level based upon tidal gauges. These are tidal gauges and so forth, and now they're looking at radar satellite, because first it was tidal gauge, and now they're able to, but they look at the tidal gauges and they do look at the radar, and the tidal gauges, they've confirmed that the radar does conform to the tidal gauges, and now they don't have to use the tidal gauges, and they can go global, right? Because you don't have a tidal gauge everywhere. So what this shows is that once they found out that the radar altimetry, anyway, it reflects exactly what you're seeing on the tidal gauge, then they don't have to do tidal gauges anymore because that costs a lot of money. So the radar altimetry is probably from airplanes, right? Flying. And now they have satellite data that's going to be a whole another way of showing it. And so the measurement changes, but that's not related to the slope. It looks like the slope changed because of the method changed, but this is actually just the fine scale. I guess that's just a coincidence, but that's a good question though. That was, you have a scientific mind. Yeah. So, but if you look at the NOAA data now, it looks like this last year was close to 10 millimeters. Now, is that a fluke? And if you average it over the next 5 years, will it be that high, or will it be higher or lower? So like I said, the ices are starting to melt, but also part of this sea level is related to the thermal expansion of the water. If the ocean is hotter than it's ever been, that means it thermally expands, because heat causes the expansion of liquids. So it's partly thermal expansion and partly melting. So that's it. So that's enough on that one, because I know we might have more questions. Is that good?
Laurent.
Yes,
Okay.
Austin. Yes, I wanted to thank you for the presentation, which was very rich, and it really showed how much perseverance you have shown throughout the years. And you have also been able to empower new generations. And this gives a lot of hope, having more new generation involved in that restoration, and continue the fight in that direction. So really, I just wanted to share that is very inspiring, because I think we can get inspired from your story, not just on coral reefs, but in any other kind of restoration projects. And like you said, nature-based solutions, there are many solutions, and nature can be more resilient than we think. And so I think these are beautiful examples. Thank you for sharing, and I'm very convinced that this will continue.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bowden-Kerby, for your presentation today, and specifically your point of view on the future and how Christians can view their teachings for a positive view of the future, and sharing with us your positive story of your neurodiversity and how it has impacted your career and your worldview. I really appreciate all that amazing perspective.